It was a humid evening in Oshodi. The power had been out for hours, and a candle flickered beside the window, casting dancing shadows on the peeling walls of the one-room apartment. George sat on a threadbare cushion, gently rocking their 3-month-old baby girl, Monica, in his arms. Her soft cries filled the air, but George's touch was calming, steady like a father who had learned to survive storms. Cynthia stood near the door, her body tense, her phone pressed against her ear. Her lips trembled not from fear, but from something deeper, something electric. George watched her from the corner of his eye. Then it happened. Her face lit up, the kind of light George hadn't seen on her face since their wedding day. "Yes, sir. Yes, barrister. Tomorrow morning, I'll be there." She ended the call and turned, her eyes wide and glistening with something George couldn't place. "What happened?" he asked, rising from the floor. Cynthia dropped her phone on the plastic table and took a deep breath. "That was Barrister Donald," she said, her voice shaking. "Chief Johnson Obinathy Billionaire. He sent his lawyer to call me. He believes I'm his daughter, his real daughter. He wants a DNA test tomorrow at Federal Hospital." George blinked. "Wait, Chief Johnson? Johnson's group of companies?" "Yes, the same man. He said they've been searching for me for months, that I might be his blood." Silence fell. Then George, still cradling their baby, said softly, "Cynthia, have you called your mother? Asked her if there's any truth to this?" Cynthia shook her head hard. "There's no need. I knew it. I've always known that Emeka isn't my real father. We look nothing alike. He's too poor, too small. I was born for greater things." George stared at her. Her words stung. The woman he loved, the one who once sold her gold earrings to buy him cough syrup during his final year fever, now sounded like someone else. "Cynthia, even if it's true," he began, "it doesn't change who raised you." "I'm going tomorrow," she cut in. "And George, if this is real, everything will change. Everything." That night, George barely slept. He sat with Monica in his arms, rocking her gently, watching as Cynthia packed a small bag, humming a tune he'd never heard from her before, a confident, dangerous tune. The next morning, Cynthia dressed in her best gown, green and gold Ankara with a matching headscarf. She applied makeup with precision, sprayed her last drops of perfume, and kissed Monica's forehead briefly. "You'll watch her, right?" George nodded. "Of course. But I can't go to work. My boss already threatened to sack me if I skip another day." "I'll be back before evening," she said, stepping out into the rising Lagos sun. But George knew nothing would be the same again. At Federal Hospital, Cynthia waited in the VIP lounge the VIP lounge for almost an hour. Barrister Donald, tall, bald-headed, and regal in his agbada, finally arrived with 3 nurses and 2 security guards. "Miss Cynthia, thank you for coming. Chief Johnson is inside. He's very ill, but he insisted on meeting you before the test." Cynthia followed them down a hallway that smelled of bleach and quiet money. When they opened the room, she gasped. There he was, Chief Johnson Obinna, lying weak on a hospital bed, tubes in his nose, but his eyes sharp, watching her like a hawk. He lifted a frail hand and managed to smile. "You look like your mother," he whispered. Tears welled in Cynthia's eyes. She dropped to her knees beside the bed, unsure of what to feel. The test was taken swiftly. An hour later, the results came in. Positive. Chief Johnson closed his eyes and smiled again. "My daughter, you're my blood. I've found you." He turned to his lawyer. "Change the will. Immediately." By nightfall, Cynthia had $1 million to her name and 3 mansions in Lekki. One of them even had a private elevator. Everything she had once dreamed of was now reality, and she hadn't even had to work for it. But she wasn't done. Before heading home, Cynthia took a detour to a small flat in Egbeda. Her mother, Sandra, was sitting on a stool beside Emeka, the only father Cynthia had ever known. A pot of egusi soup bubbled nearby. When Cynthia broke the news, Sandra froze. Emeka stood up slowly, trembling. Sandra burst into tears. "I didn't know he would ever find us," she whispered. "It was a mistake. A one-night thing at a party. I loved Emeka. I didn't want to lose him. Emeka looked at Cynthia, the pain in his eyes too deep for words. So, you're not mine? No, I'm not, Cynthia said coldly. I knew it all along. You gave me nothing. You failed me. My real father is a billionaire, and I finally understand why I never felt like I belonged in this life of poverty. She turned and walked away. Emeka collapsed back onto the chair, sobbing like a man whose entire world had just fallen apart. When she returned to Oshodi that evening, George greeted her with Monica in his arms. But Cynthia didn't smile. Instead, she looked around the room and said, "This is no longer my life." "What are you talking about?" George asked, confused. "I've bought this building," she said flatly. "I'm demolishing it soon. A mall is coming here." George chuckled nervously. "Cynthia, are you okay?" "I'm beyond okay. I'm the daughter of Chief Johnson Obinna, a woman of class, and I can't stay with a man who earns $75K a month and smells of sweat and baby powder." George's face fell. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," she hissed, walking to the closet and dragging out his bag, "get out." "What?" "I said get out." She shoved the bag toward him, grabbed Monica's baby bag and threw it too. "And take her with you. I don't want to be tied to this old life." George stood frozen. The woman he loved, the mother of his child, had just kicked him and their baby out because she found a billionaire father. He looked at Monica, then at Cynthia. "You'll regret this," he whispered. "I won't," she replied. "I've arrived." George stepped outside into the dusty street, tears streaming down his face, baby Monica crying softly in his arms. Cynthia stood at the doorway, watching them disappear into the night. Then she slammed the door shut behind her. Exactly 1 week later, Cynthia stood at Chief Johnson's funeral, dressed in pure white lace, gold necklace glittering on her chest. But just as she turned to walk past the grave, his first son, Maxwell, grabbed her arm. "Let me tell you something, Cynthia," he growled. "We may not be able to remove you from the will, but as far as we're concerned, you are not one of us. Enjoy the money, but don't ever come near our family again." Cynthia froze. The cameras were rolling. Guests stared. She tried to smile, but her lips trembled. For the first time, she felt alone. Cynthia sat on the edge of a white leather couch in her Lekki mansion, the air around her thick with perfume, fresh paint, and silence. Her heels clicked on the marble floor as she walked to the giant window, staring at the sparkling city lights below. Lagos looked beautiful from up here, nothing like the Oshodi she had left behind. Yet, despite the millions in her account and 3 mansions under her name, Cynthia couldn't shake off the sting of what Maxwell told her at the funeral. "You are not one of us." Those words kept echoing in her head like a curse. She had walked into the Obinna family compound, wearing the most expensive lace gown she could find. Cameras clicked. Journalists whispered. Everyone stared. But instead of feeling like a daughter of the house, she felt like a stranger at a party she wasn't invited to. Chief Johnson's children, 5 of them, all dressed in coordinated ASO, Ibi barely acknowledged her. The lawyer stood with her briefly, but even he looked uncomfortable. And when the will was read, leaving her the $1 million and 3 properties, the tension in the room became sharp as a knife. Maxwell wasn't the only one who glared. His younger sister, Vivian, a lawyer herself, had called Cynthia a gold digger in hushed tones. Cynthia smiled through it all, but her fingers trembled under the fabric of her jewel. Back at home, though, she tried to forget. She drank champagne, had daily massages, hired chefs to prepare continental dishes, and went live on Instagram with filters and designer sunglasses, telling her followers to never settle for less. But in her quietest moments, she found herself checking George's WhatsApp status from a fake account, hoping to catch a glimpse of baby Monica. Far away in the outskirts of a gauge, George sat on a stool outside his mother's compound, bouncing Monica gently on his knee. His eyes were sunken from sleepless nights, and his shirt had milk stains on the shoulder. "Mama, how did it come to this?" he asked, voice weak. His mother, a woman hardened by Lagos hustle, wiped her hands on her wrapper. "It came to this because you loved the wrong woman." She changed, Mama. That's not the Cynthia I married. She didn't change. The money just showed you her true self. George looked at Monica, her tiny hands grasping his thumb. I'll raise her alone, he said, even if it kills me. And he meant it. Despite the warning from his boss, George returned to work the next day with Monica strapped to his back in a baby carrier. His colleagues laughed, some pitied him, but his manager wasn't amused. This is a bank, George, not a daycare. I understand, sir, George said, but I had no choice. The manager sighed and turned away, but 2 days later, George was called into the HR office. Instead of being fired, he was promoted. Why? An elderly customer had posted a video on TikTok showing George calmly handling transactions with a baby on his back, saying, "This is the most hard-working young man I've ever seen." The video went viral. The bank, in a bid to improve its image, gave George a raise and a new role, customer experience manager. From that day forward, George's life began to turn slowly. Meanwhile, Cynthia's world was spiraling in the opposite direction. She had ignored every financial advisor and refused to consult experts. Her goal? To become the most powerful female property owner in Lagos. I'll build the biggest mall in Lekki, she told Barrister Donald, and I want it done fast. Against advice, she hired a man she met at a yacht party, Jonathan, tall, British accent, smooth talker, and allegedly a top contractor. She gave him full control over the project. Within a week, she had transferred the full $1 million to him. Speed is my style, Jonathan had said, smiling over red wine. Trust me, darling. I'll make you richer than your father ever dreamed. Cynthia believed him. She even posted online, "Watch out, Lagos. The real boss lady has arrived." But the signs started showing. First, she visited the mall site one Monday morning. It was empty. No workers. No machines. Just bush and sand. Maybe it's weekend delay, she thought. Then she visited one of the mansions Jonathan was helping her sell. Gone. The next one? Sold. Third one? Strangers had already moved in. Cynthia's heart began to race. She dialed Jonathan. Number not reachable. She tried again. And again. Still nothing. She drove to the address he gave her when they signed the contractant office in Victoria Island. Vacant. Jonathan doesn't work here, the building security said. Cynthia's knees buckled. She collapsed right there, in her $600K designer dress, screaming, "No, no, this can't be happening." She was rushed to the hospital. Diagnosis: panic attack, high blood pressure, and dehydration. When she woke up, the reality hit her. Everything was gone. The money, the properties, the dreams, gone. She checked her account. 492. That was all that remained. The next morning, Cynthia, dressed in a plain wrapper and scarf, sat on a wooden bench at a roadside junction. She held a tray of tomatoes and pepper, whispering prices to passing customers. "This is not my life," she muttered under her breath. People passed and stared. "Is that not Cynthia, the Obina girl, the one with mansions? I thought she flew to Dubai last month." Money don't finish. She tuned out the noise. Focused on survival, she tried reaching George. She begged. She called. She texted, "Please forgive me. Take me back. For Monica's sake." George read the messages and ignored them. His life was different now. Stable. Peaceful. Filled with love from his daughter. But Cynthia couldn't stop. She went to his office, waited by the gate, cried in public. When she finally saw him with Monicano, a bright-eyed 6-year-old in a pretty pink dress, her heart shattered. "George, please." George stared at her, then said quietly, "I've moved on," and walked away. Monica didn't even recognize her. One hot afternoon, Cynthia was arranging tomatoes on her wooden table when a black SUV pulled up. The window rolled down. A young woman, wearing a crisp pilot uniform, dark shades, and glowing brown skin, stepped out. Cynthia's mouth fell open. It was Monica, all grown up. Before Cynthia could speak, she dropped to her knees. "Monica, my daughter, please, forgive me." Shoppers stopped. Phones came out. Someone began recording. Monica looked at her silently, then said, "Get up." Cynthia trembled. "I'm so sorry." Monica reached into her handbag and pulled out an envelope. "There's 5 million inside. Open a real shop. Live well, but understand this." Cynthia looked up. Monica's voice broke. "You may have given birth to me, but you'll never be my mother." And she walked back to the SUV. Cynthia watched the car disappear into traffic. Her knees gave out. She wept, not because of the money, but because of the name she would never hear again. Mummy. The market fell into an eerie silence after Monica drove off. The SUV had barely disappeared into traffic when whispers erupted like wildfire. Now, that was her daughter? She disowned her own husband and baby now. Look at her. She no even call her Mummy, Chai. Cynthia remained on her knees, tears running down her powdered face, soaking into her scarf. The 5 million envelope trembled in her hand, yet it felt like dust. Nothing could fill the hole in her heart. All her life, she had believed success would bring her respect. That money would buy her love. But standing there, knees in the dirt, mocked by strangers, she finally understood. Respect isn't given by wealth. It's earned by love. Cynthia didn't go home that day. Instead, she walked the streets of Lagos until the sky turned black and the streetlights flickered on like judgmental eyes. She ended up at a small Catholic church she used to pass on her way to campus during her university days in Nusuka. It was quiet, empty. She walked inside, dropped the 5 million envelope at the altar, and knelt down again. "God, please, let me start again," she whispered. The next day, she used part of the money to open a proper vegetable stall in a small shop near the junction. She stocked it with fresh tomatoes, pepper, onions, and dry fish. She hired a young girl from Benue to help, and every morning they would sweep the shop, say a short prayer, and open for business. No more wigs, no more lace. Cynthia wore plain wrappers and rubber slippers now. She avoided mirrors, avoided Instagram, avoided her reflection. But deep down, she carried one hope, that maybe, just maybe, Monica would come back and call her mummy just once. Meanwhile, Monica's life was rising like a sunrise. She had just been promoted to senior pilot with one of the top airlines in West Africa. People praised her everywhere. Newspapers interviewed her. Her story went viral. Abandoned baby becomes pilot. When a reporter asked if her mother inspired her, Monica smiled sadly. "No, my father did." George watched the interview on YouTube and wiped a tear from his eye. He was now the branch manager of the same bank that once threatened to sack him. His face was on motivational posters. He was invited to youth empowerment programs to share his story. But even with his success, he never remarried. "I'm married to my purpose," he would often say when people asked. And that purpose was Monica. Back in Lekki, the Obina mansion was now cold and silent. Chief Johnson had been buried for 6 years. His sons and daughters were busy fighting over shares and properties. Vivian, the sharp-tongued lawyer, was now leading a court case against Maxwell, who had secretly tried to sell one of the oil fields without board approval. Their empire was cracking, and for the first time, someone from the family reached out to Cynthia. An old housekeeper from the Obina home called her one evening. "Auntie Cynthia," she whispered, "they are planning to take your name off the family company." Cynthia didn't respond. She didn't even care. What was the point? She had tasted that world and lost herself in it. The money, the gold, the lies, it all meant nothing now. But fate wasn't done with her yet. One afternoon, as she was closing the shop, a small voice called out behind her. "Excuse me, madam. Please. Do you have water?" She turned. A young boy barefoot, hungry, maybe 7 years old, stood there, sweating under the Lagos sun. She rushed inside, grabbed a cold sachet of water, and handed it to him. He drank it like it was life itself. "What's your name?" she asked softly. "Ikenna," he replied. "My mother is sick. We haven't eaten since yesterday." Cynthia's throat tightened. The boy reminded her of George, of Monica, of the baby she threw away for wealth. She gave him a plate of jollof rice, some fruit, and a note for his mother. "Tell her to come tomorrow. I'll help her." As the boy left, Cynthia stood at the doorway and whispered to herself, "I may not be a mother to Monica, but maybe I can be a mother to someone else." But as Cynthia tried to rebuild her broken soul, something else was quietly building against her. Jonathan, the man who vanished with her money, was back in Lagos, except he wasn't going by the name Jonathan anymore. Now, he was Chief Jide, a rising real estate developer known for throwing lavish parties and sponsoring celebrity events. And one night, while watching TV in her shop, Cynthia saw his face flash across the screen. Lagos real estate kingpin, Chief Jide, to open Africa's biggest mall in Lekki next month. Her heart stopped. The mall in the video was exactly her design. The sketches, the layout, even the colors. Everything she dreamed of, everything he stole. Now it was happening under a new name, under his name. Her hands trembled. She dropped the remote. And suddenly, all the shame, all the pain, all the silence became fire. She stood up, grabbed her small Nokia phone, and dialed one number she thought she'd never call again. "Hello, Barrister Donald. I need your help." The next morning, Cynthia stood outside the gate of Johnson's Chambers, Lagos Island, holding an old file of documents, the original design plan, the property transfer receipts, and the fraudulent contract Jonathan signed before disappearing. She was about to step forward, when a black Range Rover pulled up beside her. The door opened slowly, and out stepped Vivian Obinna. She stared at Cynthia with those same cold eyes from the funeral 6 years ago. "What are you doing here?" Vivian asked. "I'm taking back what's mine," Cynthia replied, standing tall for the first time in years. Vivian gave a wicked smile. "Let's see if you're ready for war." Cynthia stood her ground. The Lagos heat pressed down on her skin, but the fire inside her burned hotter. She clutched the worn-out envelope tighter, proof that the mall design Chief Jide was bragging about belonged to her. Her blood, her pain, her fall. Vivian folded her arms, her heels clicking against the pavement. "You think just showing up here with old paper will change anything?" Cynthia met her gaze. "Those old papers are signed contracts, design proofs, bank transactions, and dates everything I need to expose him." Vivian smirked. "You should have stayed in your market stall, Cynthia. This world, our world, isn't for people like you anymore." Cynthia's voice didn't shake. "Then I'll drag your world into mine." She turned and walked through the glass doors of Johnson's Chambers without waiting for another word. Inside, Barrister Donald looked up, surprised. He hadn't seen Cynthia since the funeral. She looked older now, simpler, but her eyes were sharp. "I need your help," she said. "That man, Jonathan, or whatever he calls himself, we stole from me, and he's about to launch a mall that's mine." Barrister Donald motioned for her to sit. She placed the documents in front of him. As he read through them, his brows furrowed. "This is serious," he finally said. "And if what you're saying is true, he could face prison time for fraud." "He won't get away with it," Cynthia said. "I lost everything. My husband, my daughter, my dignity, but I won't let him steal my soul too." Barrister Donald leaned back. "We'll need to move fast. File a court injunction before the opening. Get the media involved. Make noise." "I'm ready," Cynthia replied. As she stood to leave, she turned back. "One more thing, Barrister. I don't want the mall back for me." He raised a brow. "I want it in Monica's name." That night, in a quiet corner of her shop, Cynthia opened a brown notebook and began writing a letter to Monica, a letter filled with truth, not excuses. "I once traded you and your father for a world of gold, and when that world collapsed, I was left with ashes and regret, but I never stopped loving you. This mall was once my dream. Now it's yours, whether you ever call me Mummy again or not." She signed it, sealed it, and kissed the envelope. Cynthia was no longer chasing wealth or family. She was chasing redemption, and this time she was willing to fight for it. The courtroom was packed. Cameras lined the back wall. Journalists whispered updates into their phones. The air was tense with anticipation. At the front sat Cynthia, in a plain grey skirt and blousino makeup. No jewellery, just her truth. Across the aisle was Chief Jide, formerly known as Jonathan. Dressed in a tailored black suit, he smirked arrogantly, whispering to his lawyer. But the confidence on his face faltered when Barrister Donald stood up, holding Cynthia's signed architectural sketches and the original documentum, even with Jonathan's signature. The judge's voice echoed through the hall. Based on the evidence presented, it is clear that the defendant misrepresented his identity, forged contractual terms, and illegally assumed property belonging to the plaintiff. Cynthia gripped the arms of her seat. This court hereby freezes all current assets associated with the project known as Emerald City Mall. Full ownership is granted to Miss Cynthia Obinna, and a criminal investigation shall proceed immediately against the defendant. The gavel came down. Bang! The courtroom gasped. Jonathan's face turned pale. Cynthia blinked fast, tears filling her eyes, but she didn't cry. Not this time. Justice had spoken. 2 weeks later, Cynthia stood in front of the same mall that had once represented her downfall. Only now, a new sign stood at the gate. Monica's Place, a center for girls who dare to dream. The mall was no longer just a business. It was a mission. The grand opening was simple. No celebrities, no red carpet, just young girls from the streets of Lagos, from orphanages and shelters, who walked inside for the first time to find training centers, free workshops, libraries, and programs built just for them. Monica arrived late. She stepped out of a black car in full pilot uniform. Her eyes scanned the building. She didn't expect to be moved, but then she saw the plaque, dedicated to Monica George Obinna, from a woman who finally learned what it means to love selflessly. Monica stood frozen. Her chest rose and fell. Cynthia approached slowly, her eyes low. "I know I don't deserve a second chance," she said softly, "but I built this with you in mind. You are the only part of me I'm proud of." Monica looked at her. "Why now?" "Because I finally realized," Cynthia whispered, "you were always the real treasure, not the money." Monica didn't speak, but after a long pause, she opened her arms, and for the first time in 7 years, Cynthia felt the warmth of her daughter's hug. Not everyone clapped, not everyone forgave, but in that moment, a woman who once lost everything had finally found something worth living for. If you like this story, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories.